Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Seminole Sidelines. I'll be your host today. My name is Nick Carlisle. I am joined today by senior staff writer Curt Weiler, and that's head editor Bob Ferrante, coming to you with a special baseball/softball edition of Seminole Sidelines. Obviously, the bulk of the show is going to be about Florida State baseball as they are now starting their run into the postseason, starting with the ACC tournament. That is coming up throughout the remainder of this weekend into this upcoming weekend, and softball obviously just finished their regional yesterday with a win against Auburn. They'll be advancing to a super regional. More on that later in the show. But to start now with baseball, unfortunately, Florida State baseball was unable to complete the sweep against Georgia Tech this past weekend, and it was significant for a couple of reasons. Not so much for Florida State, more so for Georgia Tech, as they needed to win that game to get proper seeding in the ACC tournament. And then Florida State kind of controlled their own destiny. If they were able to win that ball game on Sunday, they would have locked in a top 4 seed. They were unable to do that after a 21-hour weather delay, which was it was so special to be a part of that. Let me just say, Curt, I guess I'll come to you first here. You and I were both there on that Sunday to watch the final 10 outs of that ball game as Florida State and Georgia Tech went back and forth. Georgia Tech took the lead. Florida State came back to take the lead, and then Georgia Tech was able to steal it with a couple of runs in the bottom of the 8th inning, or the top of the 8th inning, rather. Just where is your mindset right now with Florida State baseball going into the ACC tournament? Did they get a tough draw with the seeding? Would have been better overall if they just won the game on Sunday. But what's kind of your feeling on the state of the program right now heading into this tournament?
Yeah, I don't think. Sunday didn't change much of my kind of view of the program. I thought the pitching staff, frankly, did a really good job holding down. A really good Georgia Tech offense for a lot of that series. And Georgia Tech, like you said, had a lot more to play for in that. They lose that game, they would have probably been on the wrong side of the tournament bubble going into the ACC tournament, and probably needed to maybe win both their games in order to advance. The truth is, the loss didn't affect who they're playing in the ACC tournament. They were already going to be playing Virginia and Georgia Tech. It's just now, in order to make it out of their pool, because of how the pool play format works for the ACC tournament, they have to win both games. They're definitely capable of it. I think the good thing with how their schedule lines up this week, when you're talking ACC tournament, is their second game against Virginia, if they beat Georgia Tech tomorrow, is on Friday. And that, will be a kind of normal rest, even I guess a day longer than normal for Jamie Arnold, who threw last Thursday, because they kind of moved that last series of the regular season up a day to give teams more rest. But I think if they're able to win tomorrow, I think you like where they're at with Jamie going into that Virginia game. I assume Virginia will probably also throw their ace. But the truth of the matter is, they've done enough to where they're probably going to be, like, almost certainly going to be hosting a regional. They're kind of more on the national seed bubble of a top 8 seed than they are the top 16 hosting bubble. It looks like they're going to host a regional for the first time since 2018. I think with a good week this week, and we can talk about kind of where they're viewed coming into this week, I think they could very well be a top 8, and their entire path to Omaha goes through home games. And I think that would be a big deal, because they're 8-10 on the road this year. They've not been a great road team, and nobody's a truly great road team. You don't see teams. Pretty much everybody is much better at home in college baseball. But I think it's easier to see the path for Florida State. I wonder if this is a team to come out of a loser's bracket in a regional. I'll say that just because of the questions about their pitching. But I think if that entire path is at home, I think they've only lost 4 times all year at home. You would like where they're at going into postseason if they end up in that top 8, and that might depend on this week. We'll see.
Yeah, they don't have the most stellar road record out of all the ACC, but they were ahead in a bunch of games on the road in of themselves. So kind of a middle of the road, on the road team, like many in the conference. But there are some positives to take away there. And you did mention the possibility, the very, very strong possibility of hosting regional. Right now, D1 Baseball has them hosting a regional with Southern Miss Florida and Florida A&M coming into Dick Howser Stadium. Obviously, again, it kind of depends on, where the ACC tournament leads them. Georgia Tech is going to be facing Florida State tomorrow at 3 p.m. I think that game is. Bob, just kind of talk us through the forecast of that regional. What do you like about that potential group of teams coming into Howser?
I like seeing Jamie Shoup coming back to Dick Howser Stadium for one, and no pressure on Sully and the Gators if they are a lower seed coming into Tallahassee, and we will perhaps finally see those weekend arms. I think forever Florida State fans and Florida fans have wanted to see the best pitchers in a potential Florida State-Florida matchup if that comes about, right? A lot of ifs. I don't know if that's the way it's going to play out. If I'm on the committee, and let's remember Michael Alford is on the committee this year, so he might have to recuse himself from the Florida State conversation, but he'll be in on the conversation of some of these teams that are fighting for those, say, Final Four team in type of conversations. What does he say about Florida, for example? And does he think Florida geographically should get a benefit of being in Tallahassee versus going to Clemson versus going out west? There's a lot of different conversations there. I historically don't love seeing a Florida State just because I covered some of those super regionals years ago. I don't think Florida State and Florida should be matched up just because of those regular season games. Would it be fun? Would it be great theater? Would the fans love it? Would the atmosphere be great? Absolutely. Do I see it happening? No.
You say the fans would love it. I will say, I could be proven wrong. I'm not sure Florida fans, after those 3 games against Florida State this year, would especially love it. I mean, Florida State didn't face the weekend arms, but the only especially consistent weekend arm Florida's had has been Jack Caglianone. So, yeah, I mean, we'll find out. I tend to agree with you. Should they be rewarded for a season where they're right on the bubble? I mean, they had to win the last 2 games against Georgia, or they almost certainly wouldn't have been eligible, wouldn't have been above 500 to be eligible for the NCAA tournament. So we'll find out in about a week's time. I will say it doesn't seem like a slam dunk that Florida makes it in. I mean, there are a bunch of teams that I think that 13 and 17 in the SEC, and like I don't think all of them are going to get in. I think some of them will get in, but it is. I mean, it speaks to how that conference is perceived. That 13 and 17 is good enough for in conference play for a lot of these teams.
And you mentioned being rewarded. I'll tell you somebody that did get rewarded, and that's James Tibbs III. He was named ACC Player of the Year earlier today. He has had an absolutely massive season. Obviously, you could see the numbers at the bottom of your screen right now, a 385 batting average, 24 home runs, 23 strikeouts. He's got more home runs than strikeout guys. And I can't remember the exact placement, but I think he's maybe the 6th. He has the 6th most home runs in the history of the program. Is that right?
Yes. With one more, he'll move into a tie with Mike McGee for 5th all time. He's at 51. Mike McGee is 5th at 52. And that's going to be as high as he gets because there's a jump up. But when you look at him as a 3-year guy relative to a lot of 4-year guys ahead of him, or guys that played, I mean, Bob, you can speak to the BB core, the trampoline bat era. You know, I mean, Buster hit 26, and Buster's a heck of a player, but Buster did it with those trampoline bats.
Yeah. So he was one guy that got rewarded today. Arguably, you could have made a case for Link getting ACC Coach of the Year today as well. But Curt, you talked with Tibbs earlier in the year about, why he decided to stick to Florida State and come back this year and hit the reward of the type of season that he had. Just what did this season mean to Tibbs, do you think?
I mean, if we're looking at it strictly from, I think this season, I mean, putting all he did together at the plate, I think showing a lot of improvement as a right fielder. I mean, he's made quite a few really, really nice plays out there. I think it's shown to be a plus corner outfielder. It's not a premium position, but if it's a position you can play well, I mean, that makes a difference. Also, I mean, hasn't committed any errors. I think when you put all of his body of work together and how he's grown each of his 3 years at Florida State, he's helped himself financially in a huge way, where I think he's now viewed as a maybe even top half of the first round type of pick in July's MLB draft. And when you're talking signing bonus, I mean, going from being 2nd or 3rd round to maybe top 15 or so is a huge deal. I mean, you're talking millions in the slot bonus for your slot for your signing bonus. So that's, I mean, it's been huge for him. And I think it's I think a big deal for Link going forward. I mean, use it as a transfer recruiting tool. I think use it as a high school recruiting tool. I think you can talk about, I mean, he believed in us. He stuck it out. Look at the season he had. I mean, I think when you look at the stats, it's up there with recent Florida State, the best seasons we've seen from a Florida State player of late, especially, I mean, the quality of arms, Bob, you could probably speak to it better than me. Feels like the quality of arms is higher nowadays in college baseball. More guys throwing 97, stuff like that. It is harder than when maybe some guys in the 80s, 90s, maybe even the 2000s were doing it. And so to have the kind of season he's had, I mean, I think does he have a 500 OBP? I think he might like reach base essentially half of his at-bats. It's been remarkable. And I think all my interactions with him too, I mean, when you talk about quality of person, I think have been overwhelmingly positive too. And I've heard only good things.
To get on base that often against a shift when he is being defensively played in that manner by a lot of coaches. I mean, they've got the analytics. Who knows if they use spray charts or whatever they're using these days. But I mean, those coaches, the front offices of every college baseball program, so to speak, they've gotten bigger and bigger in how they're using the numbers and advanced scouting teams. So again, for Tibbs to hit 385, to have fewer strikeouts than home runs against, Curt, to your point, some really, really good power pitchers. We've still got some guys who have those COVID years. We've got some older pitchers in college baseball. So I think Tibbs' season, honestly, I don't want to be in the moment with him, but he feels like one of the better left-handed bats Florida State's had since at least DJ Stewart, it feels like, and I could be overlooking somebody, James Ramsey, DJ Stewart, kind of early of those 2010s. But I mean, this is a quality pro at bat. And I know, like we were talking about potential first round guy, Keith Law, who worked in the Blue Jays front office, now with the Athletic, he's got Tibbs, I think, projected around 12 to the Red Sox. So it shows you how far Tibbs has come in all facets of his game, really.
He could really take advantage of Pesky's pole in right field there in Boston at Fenway. That short porch. I mean, he's used to a short porch. He'd be going to another one. And feels like a guy, truthfully, I mean, you never know for sure, but he might have a fairly fast track. Feels advanced as a hitter where he might not be a guy who is in the minors for especially long.
No, not at all. He has come far in his time at Florida State, and I'll tell you who else is going far, and that is going to be the Florida State football team. He's going to be traveling all the way to Ireland for the opening game of this season against Georgia Tech on August 24th. Guys, August is right around the corner. But if you are interested in going to that game, our friends at Aer Lingus have hooked us up with a travel package for you all. You can go to Seminoles2Ireland.com, and here's a word for them in a short ad break.
At Aviva Stadium in Dublin, the home of the
So if you are planning on making the trip to Ireland, you can go to Seminoles2Ireland.com to get your travel packages. It is selling out quite quickly, I am told. And if you're also looking for some gear, some Florida State memorabilia, some paraphernalia, some jerseys and such, you can also go to Alumni Hall here in Tallahassee.
Hey, Seminole fans! Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI, or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop.
Where Seminole fans shop, indeed. All right, guys, so we've mentioned it briefly towards the beginning of the show, but the pitching has been something that has been a little bit criticized recently for Florida State. Not out of their fault. I mean, if you're injured, you're injured, but the health of the pitching staff for Florida State over the past few weeks has definitely shown up in some choice instances. Obviously, the Pittsburgh series is the most recent example that you could think of. The midweek at Stetson, really this entire last 2 weeks, you really can see the depth of Florida State's pitching get a little strained a little bit, but you also have some moments some players like John Abraham who can rise to the occasion. But you have a lot of freshmen in that pitching staff coming out of the bullpen. You have guys that are hopefully going to be coming back. Connor Whitaker is still coming back. Hopefully you get lighter trending in the right direction through this week. And if Florida State, through the regional, and if they continue advancing, you hope that he gets healthier. Bob, how much is the health of this pitching staff necessary for the success of this team, going however far they may go in this tournament and beyond?
I think the short answer is it's everything. I mean, let's be honest. This is why you want to host. If you have the capability of being, yes, the number 1 seed in your regional to play that 4 seed, you can flip around your rotation so that you don't have Jamie Arnold in that first game. Obviously, that's the way it could go. But then you start looking at the other games. Brendan Oxford has been looked to a ton. I mean, him lefty versus lefty is just deadly. I don't know how you even see that ball to get good contact on it. Abraham is a good option. I mean, we've seen Brady Lauk. We've seen what Carson Dorsey can do in that second starting role. But then there are the wild cards. How much do you get out of Connor Whitaker? Do we see Cam Leiter again this season? I mean, Cam Leiter is working his way back towards some role, and it could be 20 pitches along the lines of what Connor Whitaker's first appearance looked like since he came back. I think there's just so many questions about the bullpen. I don't want people to lose sight of what this team did, 39 wins, despite the pitching injuries, not having Gavin Adams, not having Jacob Marlowe for the whole year. So let's put it in perspective. The bullpen hasn't looked good, but there are reasons for why. And Florida State still has a pretty good outlook despite that.
And did you mention Connor Holtz, who's kind of become the closer over the last few weeks? I mean, he's kind of been a revelation where he was a non-factor for a long time. And I think over the last few weeks has really proven himself to be probably the bullpen arm you rely on, you believe in the most, right up there with Brendan Oxford. I think those are kind of your 1A, 1B of we're in a jam or we're trying to get 6 outs or 3 outs or whatever it may be. Those are guys who I think you think can get them more often than not.
I'm sorry. I see your dog.
He's
got an answer to the question. He's or is that a leg? Oh goodness. I don't know if we can televise that. That might be
that's mature. Relaxed, boys. That's relaxed.
That is
I think he's comfortable.
I think he is. Bob, I'm just gonna throw a fastball to you here. What's the ceiling of this team at this point?
Yeah, right. Can they get to Omaha? I think if you give me a roadmap of you can use Whitaker, you can use Leiter, it may not be the way it looked like in February or March, then I would say they can get to Omaha. If you start to put limitations on this where it gets a little bit weird because you're in a super regional and maybe you're in the super regional on the road, you don't have the advantage of Hauser, I can see this team falling a little bit short in a best of 3. The matchups are important. I'd be interested to see what you guys think. I mean, historically, I don't think the committee has placed a huge emphasis on the ACC tournament or these postseason tournaments as far as that kind of seeding. Now, if you're a team that needs to get into the field somehow, yes, it does matter. But is Florida State situated, say, at 8? Are they somehow going to bump up to 7 or drop to 10? I don't see that kind of thing happening out of this weekend. But getting to be 8, getting to host all the way through, that's really the only way I can see them getting to Omaha.
It's interesting. I think when you look at that new D1 projection we were talking about earlier, where Oklahoma's kind of all of a sudden 7, where they weren't in the national seed, they're now a national seed at 7. A good Big 12 record, not an especially great overall record, and they're worse than Florida State in RPI. Georgia's at 8. Right now in that projection. Again, it's a projection. That's not someone on the committee saying this is where things are right now. This is them saying what we think at this moment. And that is always the wild card, is we don't know what the committee is actually thinking until a week from today, Monday, when the field gets announced. The interesting thing with the SEC tournament with Georgia being at 8, and again, we'll see how much they factor in this week. Georgia's only guaranteed 1 game this week. Georgia's the 6th seed. They play number 11 seed LSU tomorrow. They lose that game, their week's done. And they're sitting at home while Florida State plays at least 2 games, maybe as many as 4. We'll see if they can make it out of their pool. So it's an interesting situation. I think it's noteworthy. So we've talked about the struggles away from home, and I think those are noteworthy. I think the fact of the matter is if you go on the road for a super, it's going to be against a good team. I do think it bears mentioning this team's, 3 hardest ACC series have all been away from home. They haven't played an especially good, like they haven't played anybody. NC State is the best team they've played in terms of ACC at Hauser. That's the only team that's going to host a regional probably that they played at Hauser. There was Wake Forest on the road. It was Duke on the road. It was Clemson on the road. I mean, that it somewhat explains why maybe they have a sub 500 ACC record or on the road too. Beyond just, I mean, that it's hard to win on the road, but that's the type of team they'd be playing. I mean, right now they'd be playing Georgia or Oklahoma or someone like that. I mean, maybe even Clemson. We'll see how this week goes, but those are the types of teams floating around that national seed bubble who they could theoretically have to go play against.
Yeah, I mean, if Florida State goes on the road, I mean, I'm woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? But I'm not so pessimistic about it because Florida State, I think they were leading at some point in Clemson in all 3 games. And Wake Forest was a winnable series as well. They have had moments where they have been in the driver's seat away on the road against some of the top teams in the country and just have not been able to close the deal. Now, if you're arguing for the half glass full position, you say, well, they could have closed the deal. Hopefully they learn from that moving forward. But again, it kind of comes back to that one question that's kind of hanging over the team. Do they have the pitching? Will they have the pitching show up when it's crunch time if they have to go on the road? And are they healthy enough to do so?
And let me get ahead of this now, especially if they make it through that regional at home and they make it to the Supers. Whatever happens at that point is gravy. Like if James Tibbs never makes it to Omaha, if Cam Smith doesn't make it to Omaha, if Jaime Ferrer doesn't make it to Omaha, that would be unfortunate. Those are Omaha-worthy players who definitely deserve to play on that stage to get that opportunity. But from where this team was preseason, where they were kind of viewed nationally as a tournament bubble team, to now be on the national seed bubble, I mean, this whatever happens, especially, I mean, you don't want to go 2-Q in a home regional. And I don't think they will. I think those bats, I mean, weird fluky things can happen. But I think those bats will probably beat whatever 4 seed is getting thrown at them in the opening game here, next weekend, a week from this weekend. But if they make a super, even if they do lose 2 or 3, and I'm definitely not sure. I think a path through a super, you need to win the Jamie Arnold start. With the state of this pitching staff, I don't think you can afford, or I would consider it highly unlikely to win the last 2 and come out of that if you lose the Jamie start to start a super.
I agree.
But it's all gravy at that point.
It's all gravy.
I want to get ahead of that because people are going to be disappointed. If they were to go to a super, they were to win the first game of a super and then lose the next 2, it would be a choke job. And I just don't want that to even be how things are talked about.
I mean, if you want to continue along that train of thought, I mean, I would argue that a lot of this season has been gravy in addition to, whatever may happen in the postseason. From where Florida State was last year to the job that we thought year 2 was going to need to be under Link Jarrett. Link has not only delivered, I would say he has over-delivered in the terms of the progress that this team has made. 26 new players on this staff in the transition from last year to this year. So you almost got back to 40 wins for the first time in the regular season since 2014. Now, I had to rewrite that a couple of times because that was the main stat in the article before Georgia Tech came back to win on Sunday. But that just shows you how offensively good this team was with so many new players. So I would argue that anything pretty much this entire season has really been gravy for Link Jarrett and the Seminoles.
Yeah, I think Link had a pretty strong case for coach there. He didn't win it. Scott Forbes in North Carolina did. They won 22 ACC games. They won 41 games overall. They kind of won the league, I think, by quite a few games, going away maybe by 3 or 4 games. It was a great season for them. When you talk about improvement, which I think is often year to year how you should look at that, when you talk about, perception of what this team was to what they've done, I think I would have given the award to Link, and maybe that's coming from a place of the team I cover. But I think the interesting thing, not to talk offseason now too, the holes Florida State's going to have, and it is going to have some in the lineup, that pitching staff's going to be in actually pretty good shape when you're talking. If Cam Leiter's healthy again, Jamie Arnold has to be back for another year. But Link and Co. get to recruit from a place of real leverage now. That last year they're having to sell vision. Now they can sell results, and I think that probably gets them in for some bigger fish if there's the NIL to back it up.
Yeah, we've hit about the 23-minute mark, so we're going to switch over to some softball here, and Bob's going to drive the train for us. He was at Joe Hindekraft all this weekend. Bob, you and I were talking preseason about what this season would look like for Lonnie Alameda and this younger softball team. And you said, and you called it, you said there were going to be some bumps in the road, and there were certainly some bumps in the road, but now they have found themselves once again in a super regional, a rematch of last year's national championship against Oklahoma. I guess my question to you is, from, where you thought they were at the beginning of the season to how this team developed over the course of the season, has this team lived up to the expectations and pushed through that adversity as you expected?
Yeah, I think we felt like this team was going to struggle just because they didn't land the transfer pitcher that, honestly, Lonnie Alameda said after the loss in Oklahoma City that they were going to go out and need to get. Like, you're losing Kat Sandercock. It's tough to tell everybody else to prep throughout the whole offseason for what's next. Now, when you look at what this team's accomplished without a Kat Sandercock, with a McKenna Reed, I think she hasn't pitched in almost a full month now since that Boston College series. It's been a while. You're leaning on two freshman pitchers right now in Mimi Gooden and Ashton Danley, which, again, Lonnie historically doesn't want to lean on maybe more than one freshman pitcher. She's leaning on two. Allison Royalty's a little bit banged up. You've got a lot of pitching factors all going on at once, not to mention two freshmen on the left side of the infield, new faces in a couple of different important spots. I think big picture, this team is in position, is in the super regionals. We all expected them to get that far. The pisser of the draw is you're the 15 seed, and oh yeah, congrats for winning your regional. Go out to Norman, Oklahoma, where there's going to be a brand new stadium packed full of however many Oklahoma fans you can get in it. That's the bummer of the draw.
So it's interesting. You said we all expected supers, and I think Lonnie knew it was possible, but watching the interview last night, that FSU softball tweeted out, I think she did an interview on ACC Network with Alex Powers, former Seminole, from the dugout right after the game ended. And Lonnie was like, she's not normally an overly emotional person. She normally plays things pretty close to and is able to, happy or sad, kind of live in that middle and not show too much emotion on either end. She admitted, I was on the verge of tears because I think it reads almost as there were moments she wasn't sure they're going to be able to make a super just because of all the adversity they've dealt with, because of how much they had to rely on freshmen. Like you said, the state of the pitching staff lately with the two veterans kind of unable to be at their full potential or be available at all. And so I think there were probably moments, if you gave her truth serum, she might say she wasn't sure they'd make it this far again. So I think there was a lot of emotion from her in that interview last night that I think speaks to, her pride in this team, whatever happens from here. We talked about it earlier. You've reached the gravy part of now, because you look at the future and those pieces to build around. And I think this team has it definitely righted the ship from where things looked like they were going for a while, where they were probably not going to host a regional for the first time in 10 years. Yeah.
Well, you don't want to look too far ahead, but being the 15th seed, going to Oklahoma, anything can happen. Anything can happen in the world of sports, but it's gravy at this point. I don't think you're expected to win that game up in Norman at all. You watched them all this weekend, Bob. They handled Chattanooga pretty handedly. UCF and then Auburn, they got into control after the third inning. It was a bit of a runaway game. How did the team look this weekend, and where would they need to go, do you think, in the future? Is there enough pieces currently on the team that have developed themselves to say, okay, you can see that they're going to be in line for starting positions next year, or are they going to have to go to the transfer portal to find that arm that they couldn't find last year?
I think the way the game is right now, I think the portal is essential. They're going to have to hit the portal at a number of positions. I think they only brought in Annie Potter, who was, I believe, a mid-major shortstop onto this team from the last transfer portal cycle. You're going to lose Michaela Edenfield. You're going to lose Kaylee Mudge, your leadoff hitter. Couple of pitchers who have had smaller roles on this roster. So you can start projecting an Ashton Danley, a Mimi Gooden, but you have to fill holes around some of these freshmen, for example, like the Jasoni Beecham, the Issa Torres. That's a good left side of the infield. You're solid for years and years to come. Solid is the wrong word. You're really, really good for years to come. But you have a lot of holes to fill. And that's on NIL. That's on hitting the transfer portal. That's on relationships through high school camps. And maybe there's a little bit, we hasten maybe to use that Norvell formula. Maybe some girls go into the portal who picked another school the first time around, and then they're thinking, oh, I want to get back to Florida, play closer to home, or I want to get back to the Southeast, or there's something about Florida State. I miss those camps with Coach Alameda and the girls that I grew up watching. You need a little bit maybe of luck and geography helping you out, because it's going to be a lot of challenges ahead for Olympic sports, I think, in the era where the SEC can pull ahead. We're going to see Oklahoma with a ton of money moving forward in softball, right? They have all the Loves money that's invested into their stadium. Now they're going to have the SEC television money for all of their sports. So I think big, really, really big picture, I do think Florida State's got some challenges, but you look at a roster and you say, those are players that I think other players will want to come to Florida State to join a Beecham, to join an Issa Torres for what could be a pretty good program down the road.
It feels like they in baseball would benefit more if it ended up being the SEC long term than the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten would not help the softball cause. And they're not going to decide one or the other based off that. I mean, hell, they would take either one right now, if you're Florida State. But softball in the Big Ten would be weird and would not help the geography of it all.
Yeah.
And
Good
ditto
stuff.
Baseball.
Good stuff, guys. Before we end today, just want to hear from our friends at Mowry Law Firm, our newest sponsor of the Osceola. Let's listen to see what they have to say.
Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
Once again, thank you to Mowry for hopping on as a sponsor of the Osceola, our newest sponsor. Good stuff today, guys. I think very informative, and obviously there's a lot of exciting softball and baseball to watch moving forward. So
our schedule coming up, we've got baseball, Florida State, Tuesday, 3 p.m., Friday, 11 a.m. The Super Regionals, that's going to start Thursday night out in Norman, Oklahoma, 7 p.m. I think it's on ESPN too. So a lot of those events, Nick, I know you and Pat are working the recruiting front. Lots of stories coming up there because it's almost official visit season.
We're gonna have Hollis Davidson come in for an official visit, I believe on Wednesday or Thursday. So visits are truly kicking off, and it's going to be quite hectic. And so some camps are going to be coming up in the next few months. So it's going to get busy here real soon. Curt, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of kicking off, crazy it is. We're about 3 months out from the start of football season. So I think we're starting to have conversations about how to ramp that up, some summer story ideas, kind of feature type things that Bob and I are discussing, kicking around as well. So we're constantly thinking about that. I mean, crazy as it is, the off season's past the halfway point of being over. Yeah.
Lots of stuff coming from us at the Osceola, so make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. And if you want to read more of our content, you can, of course, go to theosceola.com or FloridaStateRivals.com. But a great way to view the content is, of course, to subscribe to this YouTube channel. When season kicks off, obviously, post-practice interviews with the coaches and players. And, of course, a huge part of it is the recruiting interviews and analysis that are going to come from Fish, Pat, and myself over the next 3 months. So make sure that you are tuned in right here to theosceola.com. Thank you all so much for watching today. My name is Nick Carlisle. That has been that right there. Sorry, wrong side. It's been Curt Weiler. That's Bob Ferrante. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time.